Right now, you can earn 4.8% on US Treasuries. That's right, 4.8% on US Treasuries, not in DeFi. How do you do that? It's super easy. We just partnered with public.com. Go to public.com, open a US Treasury account, put your cash to work. You can also get access to a bunch of other things like stocks, crypto, whole bunch of other assets all in one place. It's super cool. Public.com/empire. That's public.com/empire. All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Empire. You got me, Yano. We got Sam Kazemian from Frax, and then we booted Santiago from this one. We got Dan Smith, senior analyst on the Blockworks research team, joining us. So, Dan, Sam, welcome to Empire, guys.
Thanks for having me.
So, Sam, I'm excited we're chatting because I feel like I've been blown up with Frax stuff for the last like 6 months. If you looked in the Blockworks research Slack channel, it's basically 50% DeFi and 50% the rest is just consumed by Frax info. So I'm happy that we're having this conversation. I will admit I'm not as in touch with some Frax stuff as the analysts are, but as I was researching this, my first thought was like, I guess kind of found on a founder to founder note, I was like, man, this guy's there's no focus here. There's no like we've got the lending stuff, we've got the stablecoin stuff, and the more I read about it, the more I realized it's actually completely 180 wrong. There's this like core like one line vision and mission, and everything that you build ties back to that. So I thought it could be helpful to maybe start there with like, what is the overarching vision and all these products that you build, like what are they tying back to? And then we can get into some of the more specifics.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't have said it better. You captured it really well. A lot of people try to learn about like Frax, and so they're a little confused because there's like so much stuff we've built now. So Frax protocol issues the best and most innovative stablecoins. We're stablecoin maximalists, so to speak, and I'll explain how that view of like usually maximalism is not a very positive sum view, but I'll explain why I think stablecoin maximalism is kind of the best of all worlds. Usually, when you say like maximalism, it's not really like, oh, everything else is bad or whatever. But Frax builds stablecoins. Right now, we have 3 stablecoins. They have different pegs. That's the Frax stablecoin, which is pegged to the US dollar. It's FPI, which is crypto's very first CPI pegged stablecoin. It's pegged to a basket of consumer items. And then we have frxETH, which is the newest stablecoin that we've launched, which is pegged to 1 ETH. It's literally just pegged to 1 ETH. And so a lot of people call things similar to that LSDs or liquid staking derivatives. And so obviously frxETH has a lot of similarities to LSDs. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. But basically, one-liner of Frax, it's on our Twitter, it's on our community. We build the best and most innovative stable coins in the crypto space, and we build stablecoin infrastructure. And so like that's where, for example, FraxLend, FraxSwap, and also the newest infrastructure we've built for our stablecoin is called Frax Ferry, which is kind of like a bridge. It's kind of not a bridge. That's why we called it a ferry, because it goes under bridges, but it's bridge-like infrastructure for our stablecoin. So a lot of people see this and they're like, oh, the Frax guys are all over the place. They're trying to compete with Aave, and then with FraxLend, and then they're trying to compete with bridges with their funny named Frax Ferry stuff, and then they're like trying to compete with Lido with frxETH. No. We're not doing that. It's like you said really well. It's a very, very narrow scope vision. Like, for example, we don't build NFT marketplaces, right? We don't build like NFT sets or something, or we don't build something really out of left field that has absolutely no synergy with our stablecoin vision and the very narrow and few stablecoins that we're focusing on. And so every single thing we build is about our stablecoins. We build the most innovative stablecoins and the most important infrastructure to make them the most indispensable stablecoins in DeFi.
Nice. All right. So overarching vision, Frax builds stablecoins, and you've got a couple different stablecoins, and you've got all these different mechanisms and products that you've built to support that vision. When I guess take us like 12 months ago, there were all these on-chain, we can call them different things, programmatic, algorithmic, on-chain stablecoins. Today, I would say there are kind of 4 main players. It's there's USDC, there's Tether, there's DAI, and there's the like basket of stables that you guys are building, and then there's a bunch of other players. But why were you guys able to be so USDC and Tether are obviously like they're not like fully on chain stables, so it's really you
The
guys and
fiat
DAI.
coins.
Yeah. So why were you guys able to survive when someone like I don't know, Terra is probably a bad. I don't even want to lump you guys in with that bucket, but like why were you guys able to survive this like colossal deleveraging event when other folks weren't?
Yeah, so one thing I like to highlight for everyone that might not be following Frax for like the past year or so is like Frax has never lost its peg. Frax is kind of it's a hybrid stablecoin in terms of like different stability mechanisms. But one thing I will actually say is that for our 2023 roadmap, what we're doing with Frax is that we're actually bringing it to 100% CR. Completely exogenous collateral, but it will be algorithmic in the sense that all of this infrastructure, all of this on-chain stuff that I just talked about, it will run with Frax to stabilize the price spec, but it will not have any kind of reflexive collateral. It'll all be exogenous collateral, and so we've actually made that pretty clear a few times. But to drive home the point, my personal belief is that if you're trying to go for the top dollar pegged stablecoin market share, right? Things like Tether, USDC, and things like that, you have to be the closest to the risk-free asset that's pegged to the dollar, and you'll never be the thing everyone flees to in a crisis, whether it's a liquidity crunch, whether it's like a recession or things like that, if you're the most risky thing pegged to an asset. So even though we've never broken our peg, obviously, everyone knows right now, de facto, the closest thing to risk-free on chain is USDC, right? DAI wraps a lot of USDC. We have a lot of USDC exposure on chain. Our AMOs have USDC liquidity, the Frax BP pool on Curve, which is this liquidity pool that other people can pair with and get a lot of Frax protocol incentives proportional to their TVL. That is also paired with USDC, but this is not our long game. Our long game is to actually be as safe as USDC and just as safe as the closest risk-free stablecoins. And to get there and to do that, we have to have 100% CR of exogenous collateral, which we are. That is the top thing on the Frax stablecoins roadmap this year. We have some innovative stuff that we're working on, in the back, kind of with trying to get the closest possible collateral to Fed deposits, right? The Fed master account system. That kind of stuff has a little bit hard to predict in terms of like the timeline, just because it's not really coding related work, even though we're very good at shipping, smart contracts, software, and things like that. But that's one thing to highlight is I think we've done a really great job showing that we have the technology to stay at peg, which we've perfectly done. We've survived, like you're saying, the crisis of 2022 with basically crypto deleveraging, macro market deleveraging, global interest rates rising everywhere, right? But that's not enough. So like we don't actually want to just pat ourselves on the back and be like, okay, great. We're awesome too. We don't have to improve anything. No, we're going to consistently try to make Frax the safest stablecoin. Won't happen overnight, but we have very consistent plans to make it the closest thing as possible to the risk-free kind of stablecoin like USDC.
And so diving deeper into like how are we going to get the Fed deposits backing Frax? Like, what is the plan to making that possible, and how realistic is that to actually get there, right? Because if I think about the United States government working directly with an on-chain protocol, there seems to be a gap there in their willingness, just given the risk of them taking that on. But ultimately, the way you can view it from the other side is, well, this is a huge source of demand for U.S. Treasuries, and that's something that the Fed would ultimately be interested in.
Yeah, usually I don't really like to speculate around regulatory stuff because it's so hard to know, right? We're obviously trying, in the background and things like that. And we're very, attuned to what kind of regulations are coming or not coming, right? The bills that are in Congress, like the this stablecoin act that like Senator Toomey proposed last year, but it's still not really up for voter or anything close. But like, for example, that was really bullish, right? Like that actually had a pathway where stablecoin issuers can actually apply for a FMA, like the Fed master account. But I don't usually like to speculate because, we don't really know how long it'll take, but I think it's going to happen, right? Like, for example, USDC has a direct relationship with BlackRock, who manages their collateral, right? And BlackRock has direct access to the Fed's reverse repo facility, which is de facto also just another way to essentially get direct access to the Fed being your only counterparty. Right. And so they are working towards essentially what's the same thing. I think it's set up. It might not be fully like live yet, but they're working towards kind of the same structure, right? The same structure being basically, in order for you to be the closest thing to the risk-free asset when it comes to the dollar on chain, you have to be the closest thing where your only counterparty is the issuer of the dollar, right? The issuer of the thing that you're pegging to, which is issued by the Federal Reserve, right? You can't have like 20 different middlemen in between, or like 20 different like rehypothecated, like, this is a deposit of a deposit of a deposit of like this entity's deposit, but it's a dollar, right? And then at the end, it like backs USDC or like your fiat stablecoin, right? It'll never work because something will end up being the risk-free thing everyone flees to, right? And if the peg is the US dollar, my personal belief, and I think the facts line up with this, is that at scale, if your peg is the US dollar, you're not going to escape government regulation through either fake or genuine decentralization. It just will not work. At scale meaning in the tens of billions and the hundreds of billions of dollars of supply. If your peg is the USD, if it's something else, like maybe it's a basket of consumer items, which again, we have FPI. If it's something else, if it's an ETH peg or something, it should be able to be totally possible to have a fully decentralized, fully on-chain stablecoin that does not have any custodial risk or real world asset risk, or like has to bow to like regulatory pressure or anything off chain, because it's like Bitcoin, it's like Ethereum. It's the smart contracts actually can work and sustain it on chain in a fully digital economy. If your stablecoin is pegged to a sovereign country's unit of account, which they can issue at size, there is no evidence that you can escape government regulation, or that you should. There's just no evidence. I would love to talk to other people about how that's possible. I know there's a lot of people that, say that, use, X, Y, and Z tiny market cap stablecoin that's like pegged to the US dollar because it, it's fully decentralized or whatever. That doesn't work, right? Like we know unless there's a very secret stability mechanism for pegging something that no one's yet discovered, right? Like and like someone's gonna discover it and it's gonna be beautiful, and you can at scale peg to whatever unit, because like there's just this beautiful mathematical on-chain stability mechanism, which I don't think exists. But unless that's the only way you could do it, is like some kind of brand new thing. It's not possible otherwise. There's no way you can escape. And so that's why I think you don't have to over comply, right? Like you don't have to like basically, have like white lists and double black lists and like be like, you have to KYC to touch my fiat stablecoin or so. You basically have to be reasonable, right? You have to basically say, if I want this stablecoin that, my protocol issues, or in USDC's case, my company issues or something, and the next 5 to 10 years, I genuinely want this thing to be in the hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions, truly, in the next like decade. You're not going to escape like just being adversarial to like regulation if your peg is the US dollar. So
Sam, can I try to repeat back to you almost what I feel like? I feel like you've come to the conclusion over time that real world assets are crucial and necessary for the success of a decentralized stablecoin, but
No.
also you've come to the conclusion that the only real world asset that you should have as collateral is a Fed deposit.
Yes.
Okay.
Second part.
Second
Yes.
part, true.
Yes.
So maybe like I spend a
Well,
lot of time.
let me clarify that if I can.
Yeah.
So there's a thought that, you know, the next, you know, great bull market or something is going to be real world assets that come on chain and stuff. And I think that part is true. I think that that's great. There's going to have to be real world assets. There's going to have to be all of this stuff, which I'm personally bullish about. I think, you know, stuff like, you know, Frax lend or lending markets and stuff should think about lending against these kinds of assets. However, I think if you're going to back your stable coin with various real world assets like loans to private companies or things like that, you look like a commercial bank. That's what commercial banks do. That is not the risk-free asset or the closest thing to the risk-free asset on chain, right? And so what's going to happen is that if you are a stablecoin issuer that's going to back your thing with bunch of commercial paper or like real world asset tokenized commercial paper or whatever you want to call it, well, you're going to end up wrapping a very, very large amount of your supply with either the stable coin that is only treasuries and Fed reverse repo contracts or FMA deposits, or you're going to have to do it yourself as well, right? And so that's what you see in reality. You see the market. You can have many different opinions, but you could just look at the actual empirical evidence on chain and on the markets, and that's what's going to happen. We don't want to actually lend to private, you know, stuff like, you don't want to lend to private companies, car companies, this or that.
Yeah, you're just creating another commercial bank there. You want to use it.
Exactly. We want to be the closest thing to risk-free like USDC. That's our end goal.
Hey everyone, quick break from the show to tell you about US Treasuries. That's right, bet you didn't see that one coming. US Treasuries right now can earn up to 5%. I think the exact number is like 4.8% right now. I have never, I'll be honest with y'all, really thought about investing in US Treasuries. I think for mainly two reasons. One is the yields were always super low. It was like 0.5% or 1%, maybe even 2%. Now it's 4.8%, which is kind of a no-brainer. But the second big reason is that I don't know if any of you have been to the US Treasury website, but it feels like it was built for Netscape, like built, you know, for like in the 1995, 1996, 1997 period. It's like such a clunky website. Really didn't trust sending my money there, and honestly just had no idea how to navigate it. Now, I'm super excited to share that we've partnered with public.com. They have made buying US Treasuries super easy. You can move your cash into their US Treasury account right from your phone and start earning 4.8% today. There's no minimum hold periods, no settlement delays. You can access your cash whenever you want. They also automatically reinvest your T-bills at maturity, so you don't have to do anything to continue growing your yield. Not only do they have access to these, you know, to 4.8% yield through their Treasury account, but you can also trade stocks, crypto, even fractional shares of fine art and other collectibles all in one place. Super, super interesting platform. Very excited to use them. If you guys also want to use them, you can go to public.com/empire. That's public.com/empire. Head over to public.com/empire. I'm telling you guys that URL because I got to get credit for this. Move your cash into a treasury account today. Hope you guys enjoy it. So what do you think of, I'm curious to get what you think of, I was going to say Maker, but actually, so when you look at the kind of CeFi companies of the 2016 to 2021 era, I'd call them, they all started with a different strategy. Some people started with like the Anchorages and BitGos and Copper started as custodians. BlockFi and Celsius and Nexo started with like lend and borrow, stuff like that. Coinbase, like other people started as an exchange. But as you build, they all built towards the same thing. The exchanges rolled out custody rolled out lend and borrow, like BlockFi rolled out their own exchange, and they all kind of ended up building the same thing. I see this happening in DeFi, and I think either you or someone else has called it the Trinity, where like the liquidity providers end up creating a stable coin. So I saw, Aave created their own stable coin. You guys created like a lending service. Like, so I see this happening as well in DeFi. I'm curious what you think of maybe we'll start specifically with Maker. Like when you see Maker doing, there's a big debate inside of Maker where I spend a lot of time with like real world assets right now. What do you think of the real world asset like on Maker debate going on right now?
Yeah. First of all, yeah, I think that was me. I don't want to take like complete credit, but like
We'll give you credit. We'll give you credit if it was you.
the
Yeah.
Trinity
Take the
kind
credit.
of idea is like you just see this kind of financial natural selection, right? This financial evolution of there is some kind of, you know, facts out in the real world, right? And markets discover them, right? The other way to think about it is like physics laws, right? Like F equals ma existed in the world, and then Isaac Newton discovered it one day, right? Same thing with financial laws of physics, so to speak, right? I'm a very big believer of that, like there's a structure, right? There's kind of this like, so I was a philosophy major and a neuroscience major in college. So like my philosophy side is like there's basically like a Platonic form of markets, or if you prefer like a Hegelian structure to markets, and then like people discover them, like the market as a whole structures around the truth basically, and the truth is DeFi is something like stablecoins, lending, and liquidity. Everything is different flavors of these kinds of banking activities. There are, you can build them autonomously without any custodial trust, right? Like Maker with the stablecoin side, and the lending side, like Compound and Aave, like Frax Lend. Or you can build them with the custodial trust, and that's CeFi type stuff like USDC, right? And like Celsius and stuff with the lending. I think what's going to happen is that the most useful kind of activity is going to become like a winner take most market. And that's why you see stuff like Aave releasing a stablecoin, Curve releasing CRV USD, because they're already dominant in one area, right? And the only place that they have to go is to expand to the other area, which is stablecoins and lending, so that they can increase their market share, right? And so this is all just banking activity, but just in like a new generation, right? Like the digital generation, the crypto generation. That's kind of how I think about it. And so the reason Frax is just really, like I was saying, stablecoin maximalist in terms of mindset is that I think at the end of the day, the most useful and the most profitable part of all of this infrastructure is the ability to generate a liability that people use as their currency, right? And that's where most of the money or the value will be generated. The other stuff is kind of like infrastructure, and you need them, right? You need that infrastructure. It doesn't make them not important. They're critical. But in order for you to be able to be as important, like systemically important, we talk about CeFi banks and stuff being systemically important. If you're going to get large enough to become very important, you need to be able to issue your own liability that people use as currency, or the asset in place of, right? And what I mean by use as currency is, I mean to hold that in spot demand. Spot means just holding it in your wallet, or like just sending it as payments without expecting an interest rate to be paid, right? If you issue a stable coin, whether it's pegged to ETH, whether it's pegged to USD, whether it's pegged to anything, and another entity issues a stable coin, but people always prefer to hold spot the other stable coin because they have spot demand, aka demand as money, that other people call as monetary premium. You always have to pay some interest rate in order for people to leave that currency, which they use with 0% paid to them, right, to go and just hold yours, right? And you see this, for example, like DAI has a lot of monetary premium. It was the first decentralized stablecoin, and a lot of people, projects, DAOs, and stuff just hold DAI as a decentralized currency. Frax is also starting to get that, but DAI is older. DAI has more monetary premium right now, and that's why, for example, the Maker can go to USDP, Paxos, right? And it can go to these other stable coins, fiat stable coins, right? And it can say, hey, we will hold like $500 million of like Paxos if you guys pay us some interest, right? Because no one else is using Paxos, for example, as money, as spot, right? And so in order for Paxos to have anyone use its own, I mean, Paxos probably does have a little bit, right? But not anywhere near as much as DAI. So in order for for Paxos to get any kind of demand, it has to pay an interest rate, right? It essentially needs makers' permission to hold it so that it can kind of make money on its like collateral, on its treasuries, right, and pay some of it out to maker. So essentially, if you issue currency, if you're a stablecoin issuer like Maker, like Frax, which is our entire vision and goal, you need to be able to be good at creating long-term spot demand for your issuance of your liability. That's the ultimate thing. There's nothing else is like measured in terms of like how much fees do you make or how much this or that. It's how much monetary premium does your stablecoin, does your liability have compared to other people's same pegged stablecoin, right? And that's the ultimate test, basically.
Yeah, this seems like a great time to peel back a layer and get into the crypto economic side of things, specifically as it relates to frxETH, because you guys used a very interesting 2-token model here, and it almost allows you to measure that monetary premium that the asset has. So frxETH or frxETH, that actually accrues no staking rewards, and you have to actually opt into the staking rewards. So can you just walk us a little bit quickly through what that model looks like, and then specifically how that enables you to measure this monetary premium that flows through the base asset, the stablecoin pegged frxETH?
Yeah, definitely. So frxETH, frxETH, is our newest stablecoin. And a lot of people were confused by the design. I think now a lot of people are getting it, which is really cool. Which it's a 2-token design. And what frxETH is, it's always backed by at least one ETH, either in validators that are currently run by the team. Eventually, anyone can spin up validators and stuff. But they're ETH backed in validators or ETH that is in different AMOs. Right now, there's only a Curve AMO that manages the protocol owned liquidity. And essentially the idea is that there's 2 tokens. One, like you're saying exactly, Dan, there's frxETH that gets no interest itself. If you hold it, it's not rebasing, it's not interest bearing, it doesn't do anything. There's places that you can use it. For example, we do actually have incentives for you to LP on it, right? Curve also has a gauge, which we make sure to upkeep with good bribes and incentives and things like that. There's other places, other chains now actually have frxETH liquidity pairs, right? Which we do help them with incentives, and we do partner with them and things like that. But the idea is it's just an ETH pegged stablecoin. You mint it 1-to-1 with ETH. The frxETH protocol takes most of the ETH and just stakes it in validator. So it kind of looks like an LSD, a liquid staking derivative, like Lido, like Rocket Pool and things like that. It's not really, because that's why we keep saying it's a stable coin. It's an ETH pegged stable coin, but most of the ETH is in validators because that's the closest thing to as close as you can get to the risk-free rate of interest paid out by the issuer of ETH, which is the Ethereum protocol, right? The Ethereum network, the Ethereum blockchain. And so a lot of it goes to validators. Then what you could do with frxETH is you can go and you can stake it in the POS vault. This is called the sfrxETH vault, the staked frxETH vault. And that gets all the validator rewards that our validators are earning. So all of the validator rewards minus a protocol fee goes directly to that vault. And so you get out the second token called sfrxETH, staked frxETH, and that is interest bearing. That, like, the virtual price of that goes up, right? You can use that. It's a 4626 compliant, very gas efficient token. You can use it for lending. You can do a lot of stuff that's like very, very, very efficient for those specific things, for interest bearing places. And that's great. So it's just frxETH that's interest bearing. It's staked in the POS vault, and that's it. So it gets like 7 to 8% APR, which is higher than other kind of LSDs, because there's other people doing other things with the frxETH token, that inert stable coin, like providing liquidity, like using it in different places. We've actually had people already message us for integrating it in different places. And the ultimate goal, as funny and lofty as it kind of sounds, is that after Shanghai, so after withdrawals are open, we want to have frxETH be a replacement for WETH, which is the wrapped ETH ERC20 just compliant wrapped ETH token, in as many places as possible. If we can have extremely deep liquidity in a lot of places, a very deep curve pool to kind of bypass the small kind of variable wait time of the withdrawal queue, right? Then you can have deep liquidity that can always be swap frxETH for ETH, right? So people can still pay gas and things like that, but you have this very highly efficient, gas optimized ERC20 compliant ETH token that's always one-to-one, backed, extremely deep liquidity on like Curve, Uniswap, and stuff. And that is what hopefully a large amount of the DeFi community will be using as a replacement for WETH in the long term, obviously like in the 1, 2, 3 year term. But it goes back to the view again of, in order for you to be successful as a stablecoin issuer, no matter what your peg is, people have to want to use your thing as spot demand. They need to be making spot liquidity with it or just holding it as spot. You have to want to actually hold it without getting paid some like exorbitant, like, you know, unsustainable yield and things like that. Otherwise, you'll like dump it for whatever the risk-free, closest thing to risk-free stablecoin is by some other issuer, right? And so the important thing here is a lot of people call frxETH an LSD. It's probably more accurate to call sfrxETH the LSD, the staked frxETH, because that thing is the one that is the interest-bearing thing, and that it's getting all of the proof of stake validator yield. And frxETH is just an ETH-pegged stablecoin. It's actually the first kind of hybrid LSD kind of thing, with the vision being it's just ETH money. It's an ETH stablecoin. And what we can do with it is actually very unique. People haven't even considered what some of the stuff we're thinking about doing with it in terms of the WETH replacement program. We call it Wether. And the idea is that in order for us to have this be successful in the future, we basically need to get people to want to pair with frxETH. And also, we're going to want to make sure that everyone is kind of positive sum view that this is not kind of some kind of zero sum. If frxETH, replaces WETH and stuff like Lido stETH or like Rocket Pool's RETH or something like that, is going to lose out. In fact, something we're exploring, because frxETH is like a stablecoin, we can partially back frxETH with RETH and stETH. Again, if they should be super safe, which they are. They're leading LSD tokens, right? And currently, both of them are indeed larger than frxETH. They're much older, but they are larger, and so they are quite safe. So we can actually back frxETH with RETH and stETH, partly depending on the weights and the stuff that makes it the most useful as an ETH stablecoin. So we are kind of trying to have this kind of stablecoin be the kind of successor to WETH, so to speak. And we want to make sure that everyone knows that we can make the closest thing to the risk-free closest thing. I'm not saying, obviously, like there's no such thing as risk-free, caveat, but the closest thing to a risk-free replacement to WETH by backing it with the top blue chip LSDs, backing it with partial stETH, partial RETH. And so as frxETH grows, so does RETH, so does stETH, right? And so it's a very positive sum view, because we're not trying to destroy market share. In fact, we're trying to think of it like, once Shanghai is open, right, withdrawals are open, how can we make sure that the total amount of staked Ether for everyone, not just on like Frax's validators or something, but for everyone, grows as much as possible, right? Like, I'm personally of the opinion that once withdrawals are open, instead of ETH price dumping, which is like a lot of what people like FUD about and stuff, ETH price is actually going to increase nominally, obviously given if like the macro conditions in the economy stay the same and don't get worse or something, right? But all things being the same, I think ETH price will actually dramatically rise after Shanghai, not investment advice, because ETH essentially becomes interest bearing. Right now, ETH is not really interest bearing because there's this huge like time horizon risk, right? The week before Shanghai, the ETH devs could be like, oh, like something huge happened or something. We're going to push off Shanghai 8 months or 6 months. There's no withdrawals, right? You still have this kind of like risk where all LSDs are kind of bond-like, right? There's like a discount. stETH is like a cent or two, fluctuates, RETH, all of these things. And so it's not really an interest-bearing asset, right? ETH is not an interest-bearing asset currently. But when Shanghai and withdrawals are open, ETH becomes de facto an interest-bearing asset. You need an ETH stablecoin that kind of captures this monetary premium. We're hoping that it's going to be like frxETH because we've designed the whole system to be like that. But the fact that ETH essentially becomes interest bearing should increase its nominal price, right? If you think about it, if that like that's why increasing the Fed rate, right, makes dollars more valuable. The price of things come down, right? If ETH becomes de facto interest bearing, the price of ETH should go up in relative to other things. So I actually think post Shanghai, all other things equivalent, which is not a given, but all other things equivalent, I think the price of ETH should dramatically rise, and it'll slowly, obviously, like meet the time horizon. It's not like after Shanghai, it's gonna, like pump 20% in one day. Once the, event horizon is known, right? Like that there's not going to be any delays. There's not like any issues and stuff. There should be a dramatic price rise. You could argue that that's actually what's, currently happening.
Yeah, I was about to say the recent price action is making me think anything's possible. But yeah, it's clear the similarities between Frax and frxETH are actually strikingly similar. And it's clear that like building out Frax has really assisted in building out what frxETH is, what it can become. But one thing I want to hit on is the interesting bootstrapping mechanism you use. So when a user comes to Frax and says, "Hey, I want to mint one frxETH," the user provides one ETH, and it's actually 90%. So 0.9 of that ETH is used to spin up validators, and 0.1 is used for peg stability. And so that 0.1 ETH is kind of what I want to focus on here, because that gets deposited into the curve pool where frxETH finds its deepest liquidity. And so what this does is it helps build strong, like additional confidence in the asset. Obviously, these stablecoins need a strong peg, but it also generates additional income that then gets used for liquidity bribing, and that kind of spins up a flywheel of attracting more liquidity. So if you could walk us through what that looks like. There's been some recent discussions on Twitter around like the safety of this, and I'd like to get your take on that side of it as well, right? Because if what happens if the curve pool imbalance shifts, and this isn't like, it's not backed by frxETH is no longer backed by just ETH, right? It's 90% ETH and 10% an LP token that involves ETH and frxETH.
Yeah, definitely. So that's exactly the case, right? Right now there's 0.9 for every one ETH, so 90% goes to validators, which back frxETH, and then 10 goes to actually 10% or 0.1 ETH for every ETH goes to Curve, right? And it's protocol controlled liquidity. A lot of people have like a hard time doing kind of the virtual math about it, and so like they think, okay, this is kind of risky or something like that. And the answer is two things. One is, as long as the ETH is added single-sided, if the imbalance is more, if it's under peg, right? If ETH is added single-sided from the protocol's market operations, if frxETH is under peg, the collateral ratio actually rises above 100%, right? Because think about it. If you add single-sided ETH and frxETH is under peg, you're buying back your own liability at under the peg price, right? So the first thing people that are like thinking about this, that are listening, should think about the economics is, if you add single-sided ETH to a AMM pool like Curve, and the stablecoin's peg is under the desired peg, you're actually rising the CR above 100%. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is, if the stablecoin is perfectly at peg, right? Let's say it's like 50-50. You can, if you're adding, let's say 100 ETH, you can actually, in the market operations contract, also mint 100 frxETH to pair it 50-50 together. So in total, you add 200 tokens, 100 ether and 100 frxETH. This is what confuses everyone, right? This is what people are like, oh, so it is really under collateralized. I knew there was some kind of, like hocus pocus black magic going. It is underbacked. It's not. It's hard for people to do simulated math. If you think about this situation, right, there are more frxETH literally on the blockchain, right? In this example, you add 100 ETH and 100 frxETH into the curve pool because it's perfectly 50-50, okay? Recall that if it was underpeg, you just added single-sided, ETH single-sided, right? And you rise the CR above 100 because you're buying back frxETH at underpeg. If you add these 50-50, think about this. Anyone that wants to take out a frxETH token from the curve pool at the peg, they are sending in 1 ether plus a small fee into the LP, right? And now the protocol or the LP token holders, they own that 1 ETH that is now in their possession, and the user has 1 frxETH of possession, right? So the CR remains exactly at 100%. In fact, it slightly goes above 100% because there's like a tiny fee, but from transaction fees, right? But the CR in all instances stays the same. So we came up with this, like, right, originally, like you're saying, from the Frax dollar-pegged stablecoins Curve AMO. We came up with these virtual calculations. In fact, the Curve AMO does these virtual CR calculations on chain. If you look at the Frax stablecoins Curve AMO, you can literally call a view function that's like, what is the actual claims of collateral on all the LP tokens that the AMO contract has. It's actually very elegant. And so it like actually does all of it. It depends on the A factor. And it's not like if the A factor is different, the CR will go below 100. That's not true. It depends on the A factor because you have to know when and how quickly the CR actually goes above 100. Because if this A factor is very, very large, right? If it's like 5,000 A factor, even as the curve pool gets more and more imbalanced, you're still swapping at a 1-to-1 rate. It's almost like a 1-to-1 minting and redemption function, essentially, right? And so you intake the A factor as a dependent variable, whatever it is from the pool. You actually simulate all the swaps, and then you say, okay, how much in the worst possible case if someone just buys out all of the frxETH, do I have, I as the AMO, do I have claims on collateral? In fact, the CR in this situation rises. The thing you're calculating is how much does the CR rise rather than how much does it go down. So it's actually just an example of things that look one way are actually exactly the opposite. And in fact, it's good that people are questioning it. In fact, there's a lot of people that have actually looked at Frax, the dollar-pegged stablecoins, AMOs and things like that. And it's, they're like, oh, this is really cool after I actually took a look. It's all open source, right? Unlike, Terra and other stuff, we don't do any kind of like market making ever. We don't send things to like Jump or Wintermute. We don't do any centralized. Like Frax is a DAO. Nothing we do is off chain. So like, there's no hiding anything, right? And so in fact, if you don't believe something, go and investigate it. Ideally, don't make like a weird tweet about how first you think it's like super like suspected stuff, and it turns out like you actually don't understand it. You don't say. But which is usually people's favorite thing to do. But but it's been checked. Obviously, don't trust me. Verify, but also don't tweet and then verify, right? Like first verify and then but the idea, the point here is a lot of stuff that might look one way actually are exactly the opposite. When you tell someone actually this raises the CR, they're like, their mind is blown sometimes, right? Rather than, oh, this makes it like a algo Ponzi under collateralized thing. But the opposite is also true too. People should really be careful. So I like the skepticism, and it's really good. Things that look fully backed, or like the things that intuitively originally are like, oh, this is totally safe, might be really, really messed up in the back once you really do the accounting. Just like how this looks kind of weird when you look at it, but it's actually like becoming over collateralized slowly rather than under collateralized. The opposite is also true. So we like the fact that everyone is doing their part and not trusting but verifying.
Sam, I want to pull us back out for a second, just because I have two like overarching, I have two like maybe higher level questions for you. One is, do you ever, so you talked about these like business rules or like free market rules or whatever. One thing that I feel like is true in business is like going niche, and then once you tends to win, and then I think a good business strategy is like go niche, capture the niche, win the niche, and then expand out. Do you ever think that like the better strategy would be to like Lido? Lido is just focused on liquid staking, and they've like dominated that market. Or like USDC. Circle used to do all these things. Remember back in 2017, they had like one of the biggest OTC desks. They had the retail app. They sold everything. And then they just focused on USDC, and they've been able to win so far, at least, the stablecoin market. Do you ever think like, hey, maybe we should, I'm not trying to tell you how to do things, obviously, but I'm like, there's another world where you try to like dominate one market and then go into another market and then go into another market instead of doing all these different things. I just want to, I don't even know the question there. I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think the difference is that we think that narrow market is stablecoins, just strictly stablecoins, like not NFTs, not like a blockchain phone or something. I think Solana is doing that somehow or something. And the reason is that if you look, for example, people have this categorical issue, I think, or like they're like either too narrow or they're too broad, which is what I think you're criticizing correctly. Is like, for example, no one tells Binance or Coinbase you should just focus on the spot market. You're a centralized exchange. You should just focus on just the spot market, because in their mind, a centralized exchange is basically like a lot of custodial services, like leverage, fiat on off ramp, and like swapping tokens and all these things, right? It's not just the spot order book, right? Otherwise, you'd have people being like, "Oh, I don't like the fact that like Binance is doing a launch pad, and then BSC its own blockchain and all this stuff." They have a conception of centralized exchanges, just they do a bunch of stuff that's custodial in nature. That's what it means, right? I think because it was really hard from a technical perspective to build a lot of original DeFi primitives, people think that, like an AMM is just its own like market segment, and like you should just focus on like an AMM or like a lending thing, a contract like Aave or Compound that matches borrowers and lenders. That's just its own industry, and you should just kind of stay in your lane or something like that. Or like if you issue like a stable coin, right, like Maker with DAI, you should just do that. And the issue is, those are all the same thing. That at least that's my view, and the reason we're working on infrastructure like FraxLend, FraxSwap, and FraxFerry to basically support our stable coins. If you think about it, we've been very consistent. Like, we're not making FraxFerry this generalized token bridge, come and like bridge your uni tokens or like MKR tokens, and we're never planning on doing that, right? Like, we're very methodical in the scope. Our scope is just something that people intuitively think is too much, but I think they're going to come to realize, and as you said very well, like Curve is issuing a stablecoin, Aave is issuing a stablecoin, and all this stuff. People are going to intuitively realize in like the next 6 to 18 months, oh, actually, those were the same thing, right? They are the same scope. Like, we're not trying to compete with OpenSea or Blur or like Yuga Labs with like NFTs and GameFi and stuff, right? We're competing with like I wouldn't really say competing, but we're in the same area as basically like serious finance with blockchain, non-custodial primitives, right? That's basically what the scope is.
Okay, so my next question would be, so there's this blockchain trilemma, right? Which is security, decentralization, scalability. In stablecoins, I feel like you also have a similar trilemma, which is decentralization, scalability, and then replace security maybe with stability, the price stability. And I think there have been a couple of different models so far of decentralized stables. So like UST, they were like decentralization plus really scalable, but they didn't have the stability. So they depegged. Then like LUSD is decentralized and super stable, but they can't scale. And then there's DAI and Frax, which I'd say are really stable, really scalable, but there's probably like risk from USDC. Because like, right, you mentioned like the risk-free rate or risk-free asset in DeFi. And right now USDC is that risk-free asset. And that's like DAI and Frax kind of have like underlying USDC risk. So you guys, there's two different strategies. Like I'd say DAI is going down this kind of real world asset route where like they're starting to be like backed more and more by loans from private companies with like these intermediaries, and like people are trying to figure it out a little bit. Frax, on the other hand, the way I'm hearing it from you, tell me if any of this is wrong, is like you're planning to hopefully get this like Fed master account where you can get Fed deposits. And that's a $1 trillion idea right there. Like that is I see the vision. I totally get it. Isn't it contingent though on getting the Fed account? Like what happens if you can't get the Fed account?
I think we can get it. I guess that's funny.
Did I get that like overview right? And is that like,
yes.
Is that the vision? Okay.
So you totally got it right. And again, I think it's important to talk about that stablecoin trilemma, because you said it well. It's like, the issue is, and it goes back to what I was saying, is at scale, if you're a dollar peg stablecoin, I don't think you can escape kind of regulation or interaction with the state at scale. And like, for example, you said the stable coins here in your example, like DAI and Frax, they're like the only ones that are at above $1 billion market cap that are like decentralized, right? Like they're on-chain native, right? And it's very obvious. It's very hard to continue to scale these things with a dollar peg without having some kind of link to just one real world asset, right? That one real world asset is, treasuries, FMA deposits, just pure cash, right? Like reverse repo contracts, right? Just basically the Fed is the counterparty, right? Or the closest way to get to the Fed counterparty. And if you don't have that, which we don't right now, and Maker doesn't, you wrap something that's the closest thing of them, right? Like right now, fiat coins are essentially real world assets for the good ones, right? They're the real world assets for treasuries without the yield, right? And like Fed reverse repo facilities, right? Like, which is what basically Circle's trying to do. So that's the issue. The issue is that at scale, you can't, this trilemma limits you. There's no evidence that any fully decentralized stablecoin like LUSD, RWA, all of these things, there's no evidence that they can scale the dollar peg, right? Like RWA has this fluctuating peg, albeit, but it is kind of fixed to, the arbitrary 3.14 kind of pi dollar value, right? And so FPI and frxETH are not in any way constrained by this view of like, they can and will and should be fully decentralized, non-custodial, fully on-chain stablecoins, and they are currently. But the dollar pegged ones, I don't see how it's possible to ever be. And so like our view is there's a one real world asset model, right? One real world asset. You don't need more than that. Especially if you're trying to be the simplest and least risky dollar stablecoin at scale. You don't need a bunch of private loans. It'll be more profitable. So like one thing, there's nothing wrong with, for example, Maker's real world asset stuff. It might actually make them much more money, right? And it's more risky, so they get more interest from the private companies that can actually, by definition, default, and like the U.S. Treasuries get paid out.
Nice.
All the time.
I know we have a hard stop in a couple of minutes here, so I want to see if there's any Frax Alpha you can share with us, or anything that maybe you haven't shared with folks that you're open to sharing with Empire here.
Yeah. So some of the stuff. So some people probably like read all of our tweets and stuff, but we are developing kind of a new thing called the BAM, BAMM, which is called the borrow AMM, and it's like this stealth thing. It's going to come out this year, and it's kind of something that we think is a 0 to 1 innovation for DeFi essentially, and you can borrow stuff and also have spot liquidity without really an oracle. There's no like external oracle and things like that. And so the idea here is for Frax and all of our stablecoins to capture the long tail market. So have debt denominated in long tail assets, have it not be risky like long tail assets, because those need like Chainlink oracles before this, right? They all need to have like very, very deep liquidity on chain. We're trying to do it the other direction, go at it from first principles. People don't know what this does, and I don't actually want to reveal it, but it's on our roadmap. On the roadmap, we also don't reveal exactly what it is because we're like very kind of DL about it. But you heard it here first. We're working on something called the BAM, BAMM. It's totally different from anything in DeFi. Sometime in 2023, it should be out.
All right. Dan, any last thoughts here?
Yeah, no, that's exciting. Now I'm going to have to keep sliding those DMs of yours and bother you about something else. I love to hear it. I guess, so, we've talked about decentralization. So real quick, I know you're working towards removing the reliance on multisigs from Frax. And that's going to be like a gradual process, and using that 6 of 11 governance system that you guys are sort of pioneering as well. I know he was going through some audits. Do you have any timeline on when that could implementation?
Yeah, definitely. I actually think this is even a good governance and stuff is a good podcast episode in and of itself. Yeah. So just to answer super quickly, it's about 2 months, give or take, away from having actual parts of the protocol be fully using it, and we hope to do it like sometime Q2, and it's still fully set to do that. It's an interesting thing. I know you wrote about, actually I link your report a lot so people can know. So a lot of the stuff that Frax currently does using an MSIG will be fully on chain, which is basically controlled by VEFXS holders. And so it's a really interesting structure. I know that you know exactly how it works. Hopefully Q2 is the answer.
Nice. Sam, I know you got to jump, man. This is awesome. I have a feeling this will not be the last time you're on Empire. So really appreciate you coming on, man.
Of course. Thanks for having me, guys. See you.
Awesome. Cheers.
Cheers, man.